My husband and I were subjected to physical assault in the Darién jungle. In 2021, my husband and I, two young Ecuadorians, made the decision to embark on the perilous journey toward the United States. We had ambitions and dreams that we believed could only be realized in a prosperous country like America. The initial stages of the journey were not difficult. We traveled without issue to Medellin, Colombia, the starting point to enter the Darién Gap. We paid a guide, like many others, and began our walk. From the very beginning, we saw disturbing things in that jungle, from desperate people struggling through horrible swamps to the kind of despair we couldn't yet comprehend. This route was tough from the start, but I never imagined it would have such a brutal ending. I remember the second night in the jungle. We heard screams in the distance, not of pain, but of pure terror. My husband, Rubén, looked at me, his face pale under the moonlight. "Evelyn," he whispered, "are we doing the right thing? This is not a path. This is a punishment." We debated turning back right there, but the thought of the money we had already spent, the promises we made to our families, and the dream of stability pushed us forward. It was the first time greed overruled our fear, a decision that would cost us everything. We convinced ourselves the worst was over. We were tragically wrong. After 4 grueling days of walking in the jungle, we set up camp in a banana grove. It was in the middle of the night that disaster struck. About 15 armed and hooded individuals descended upon our camp. They began dragging everyone out of their tents, the women by their hair, and the men were beaten, forced onto their knees, and made to face the ground. I have always been a woman who attracts attention wherever I go, with beautiful hair, a nice figure, and a pretty face. This time was no exception. These men targeted me. What followed was the worst moment of my life. These men subjected me and 4 other women to a brutal physical assault, an unspeakable ordeal. It wasn't just the nature of the brutal act, but the manner in which they carried it out, involving beatings, bites, and cigarette burns. The most immediate crisis occurred when my husband tried to defend me. They struck me so hard in the face with the weapon that I lost my teeth. Seeing me bloodied and injured, his instinct was to protect me. But these men beat him so viciously that he was rendered unconscious for a period. When the other men in our group saw what was happening to the women, they also tried to fight back. However, the attackers focused their full cruelty on my husband for initiating the rebellion. To ensure that no one else dared to defy them, 5 of these men grabbed my husband, threw him to the ground, and subjected him to a terrible physical assault, treating him as brutally, or perhaps even worse, than they treated the women. This horrifying ordeal lasted the entire night until dawn finally broke. When these men left, they took our possessions and our dignity. Though they spared our lives, they took our very essence. For us, the experience was profoundly tragic, yet we knew we had to continue, desperate to escape that jungle. These men left us in the middle of the night and fear on our faces. We walked for 2 more days. During that short journey, one of the young women who had suffered the brutal act alongside us decided to hang herself. The 2 remaining women, my husband and I, continued walking until we reached Panama. In Panama, we received extensive help from Doctors Without Borders. They treated our physical wounds, but no one could treat our souls. The trauma was immense. If hearing this feels hard, imagine enduring it. In Panama, we decided to abandon the journey. The American dream had become the American nightmare. Even though we never reached the US, the transit itself was a descent into hell. We took a plane back to our native Ecuador, believing that returning home would allow our families to help us through the recovery process. When we first landed in Ecuador, we had a desperate, fragile hope. We believed that being home, seeing our familiar mountains, and hearing our language would be enough to heal the invisible wounds. We tried to live normally. We avoided talking about the jungle. Rubén went back to his old job. He was a foreman at a construction site. And I started a small sewing business from our apartment. But the quiet was our enemy. I would wake up every night to find Rubén sitting bolt upright in bed, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling. He would pace the apartment for hours, sometimes whispering names, the names of the men, the names of the victims. He couldn't stand the sight of the dark. We couldn't share the same bed. My presence seemed to remind him of his inability to defend me. He felt like a failure, and I too felt the deep guilt of having survived while he was broken. We were two ghosts sharing an apartment, each haunted by a different specter from the Darién. Our family saw the physical scars, but the mental collapse was slow, private, and utterly devastating to our marriage. But this was not the end. Back in Ecuador, we tried for a long time to rebuild our lives. We sought therapy, but my husband was never the same from the moment this happened, from that first night in the jungle. His trauma was so overwhelming that the man I married vanished. He began to wander, talk to himself, and suffer from severe insomnia. Eventually, we had to seek specialized medical help. My husband was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. I am certain the trauma caused this, as he had no prior history of mental illness. He was a hardworking man, full of dreams for our future, but the ill-advised decision to migrate illegally led to this catastrophic consequence. For 5 agonizing months, my husband underwent treatment, but no therapy or medication could overcome the terror he endured. No cure on this earth could help him escape the darkness. He decided to take his own life. This was the hardest thing that could have happened. I am haunted by guilt, thinking I could have prevented it. I could have simply said, let's fight for our lives here. Let's leave the greed behind. But we chose the wrong path. Today, I thank God I can tell this story, even though I too suffered the terrible ordeal. I understand now in therapy that there are fates worse than death. I shared this message to raise my husband's voice. I know he would have wanted others to hear what happened to him and what happened to me in that jungle. He died with a gaping hole in his heart, not just for the suffering, but for his inability to defend me nor those other women. He was a man who would have given his life for me. Our story ended tragically. I hope that by sharing this, people will seek advice, avoid the illegal route, and realize that the jungle is not a path. The journey to the United States is difficult, but there are legal ways to pursue your dreams. I share this message with the deepest respect for those who suffered and for my husband who is no longer here. Think carefully before taking risks in ways that should not be taken. The jungle is not a route. Thank you.